So, as most of you know, I suffer from bipolar disorder, specifically type 2. There's two types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, there's more of a balance between periods of mania and depression, with the periods being full blown mania, which tends to include psychotic delusions and a complete and total lack of self control. Not just less in self control, but absolutely no self control. Type 2 is more often diagnosed as major depressive disorder because the person is depressed most of the time, and hypomania can be very difficult to um, diagnose because most of the time it's quite pleasant. They go from being like depressed and barely able to do anything to just hyper focused, really creative, really aggressive, really confident, and generally speaking just feels great. And it's very common to misdiagnose bipolar type 2 as just a form of major depressive disorder. However, what a lot of people don't realize is there is a third state in bipolar that is neither fully manic nor fully depressive, but is both at the same time, which sounds kind of strange because you'd think the two are, well, opposite poles, hence the term bipolar. But there is a third position which is known as a mixed state. That is where a sufferer is going through both a manic and a depressive phase at the same time. Generally speaking, I get them when I'm switching from one to the other. So oftentimes it'll be kind of an in between a period of hypomania to depression or a period of depression to hypomania. There'll be a day or two in between that I'm in a mixed state. But I was going through one today, so I figured I might as well do a video talking about it. So, how can you be depressed and manic at the same time? If you ever remember, like, the cartoons you used to watch as a kid or just some kinda cheesy action movie, you'll notice that there's often a villain who has maniacal laughter. And it is the same sort of mania that they were referring to in bipolar disorder. A mixed state kinda makes you feel a bit like you're a supervillain because you feel, generally speaking, very energetic, very focused, very, I don't know, creative. You have a dramatically inflated ego. You feel like you're on top of the world. You feel like you can do anything. You're very agitated. You're very angry. But that is combined with all of the misanthropy and self hatred of depression. So basically, it takes the aspects of depression and straps a turbocharger to them. It also will often add in some delusional or psychotic elements to it. I've never experienced psychotic episodes, but this is more or less the closest I come. So you start having kind of like insane thoughts like the world is evil and your presence in it is corrupting the world. So you have to figure out a way to destroy yourself in order to protect the external world from you. And one of the things that prevents people from committing suicide when they're depressed is they're just too lazy to do it. They just feel really sad. They feel very sluggish. They can't really get their act together in order to do it. That's one of the reasons why people often commit suicide when they start taking antidepressants, because until they fully start to work, suddenly the depressed person has energy and agency again. And so there's like something to actually fuel their self destructive tendencies. There's also even more so than a strong self-destructive tendency is there is a tendency to push your misanthropy outward. Generally speaking, when I'm in a mixed state, I hate absolutely everyone. My brain seizes upon very small issues with them, and it kind of paints the world in an extremely black and white way, and I start to see these like external people as corrupt, as evil, as something that needs to be destroyed or cleansed from the earth or something like that. And you start to get delusions often that you're some sort of megalomaniacal genius or some sort of divine messenger who's been sent to deal with the filth of the world or whatever. And it can go to that direction. It can go into the desire that you're the superior being and everyone who's hurt you or messed with you has to go down. There's an extreme sense of self-righteousness in this, in which you will get into fights with people. Generally speaking, when I was younger, before I was properly medicated, most of my interpersonal relationships died um, because I was in a mixed state. So someone would say something that slightly irritated me, and I would just explode and just start tearing them apart and telling them how shitty they are and how I hate them and how they're evil and how they need to be like removed from the earth and just kind of stuff like that. Or I'll do something really rash and I'll just delete them on all social media and block them and tell them I never want to speak to them again, or just storm out or do something else very rash that at the moment. And part of the issue is because you're manic, your like dopamine thing is going crazy. So as you're doing crazy stuff that's destructive, your dopamine's saying, yes, this is great, keep destroying relationships, keep just posting insane shit. I know people sometimes will find that I'll put up a video or I'll do a post and I'll take it down. That's often something I put up when I'm manic or in a mixed state or something. You really don't have the same level of inhibition that you normally have, but that's coupled with extremely misanthropic worldview, this extremely negative way of looking at everything. So, whereas sometimes when you're manic, you might be irritable and somewhat arrogant, but you're also creative. So you'll like sit down and write like this massive paper in a couple hours. And if somebody like has a minor criticism, you might yell at them. Generally speaking, you can channel that nervous energy into something productive, where you can produce something really good. A lot of artists are like that. But in this case, you just can't, and it's channeled into like the most self destructive tendencies possible. And it is very much a mixed state. You do very much feel like you want to laugh insanely and cry at the exact same time. And it does very much feel like your brain is being internally torn apart by these inherent contradictions. Almost kind of like somebody's taken your brain into a blender or something, and you just really have no idea what's happening until you kind of eventually calm down afterwards. And there's often a what have I done? What did I do when I was like that? And I take mood stabilizers now, so it reduces it quite a bit. But even so, and people occasionally have talked to me on social media or in the Discord server or something, will find there's days where I just post a whole bunch of like really vicious, random stuff. And that tends to be when I'm in a mixed state. That's not to say I should be on social media when I'm doing that, and I've gotten better about not being on it at the time. But you have to understand, in that moment when your brain's flying on mania, you feel like the smartest person in the world. You feel like you know exactly what you're doing and no one else knows what they're doing. One of the things that's also kind of dangerous about it is, unlike something like ADHD, generally speaking, when you're manic, you are performing a lot better. You are actually doing things better. You can focus more. You are more creative. And that kind of creates a bit of a self reinforcing loop because you are generally operating, at least I find, at a much higher level. And I guess how I kind of term that is, generally speaking, if I write an essay or do a piece of work or something while I'm in a manic state, it will be just better. Like I'll have written it faster. There'll be fewer errors in it or something like that. And that kind of, it's good because unlike maybe some mental illnesses, you might get a little productivity out of it, but it does reinforce it. And that's probably why, in part, the suicide rate is so high in bipolar compared to a lot of other disease, mental illnesses, is because of the mixed state, because you have those periods where you're hyper energetic, but also have the worst possible worldview. And those two things make a very nasty combination. So I hope people found that interesting. It helps me a bit just to talk about it. Like I said, I've been going through this the last day or two, and it's not been very pleasant. But I find talking about this stuff helps, and a lot of people out there just feel that I describe it a bit better than some others. So um, hope you enjoyed the video, even if it was a bit depressing. God bless, and I'll talk to you real soon.